But we want to welcome you back to our special coverage of the Iowa Republican caucuses. I'm Del Walters here in Des Moines, Iowa, with
Maritza Giorgio, and we want to let you know that DDHQ is calling that second place finish that we've been watching really closely. It's calling it for DDHQ, calling it for Ron DeSantis coming in second. That puts Nikki Haley third in the Iowa caucus. Certainly not what she hoped a week before we go to New Hampshire here. But we want to right now bring in political strategist Steve Schmidt. He's the founder of The Warning, a Substack newsletter, YouTube channel, and podcast. Steve, we just heard the former president speak. I was surprised to hear him sing some praises of not only DeSantis and Nikki Haley, but also Vivek Ramaswamy. He said they all ran good campaigns. What's your takeaway from hearing his speech just now?
Donald Trump has these brief moments of magnanimity across the primary landscape when he praises his opponents. And he's sending them a signal. What he's trying to communicate is wrap it up, get on board, it's time to unite. I'm going to be the Republican nominee. And if you judge the campaigns that both DeSantis and Nikki Haley have run, it's been clear for some time that they appreciate that as well. And it explains why they haven't really laid a glove on him, at least not until the last 24 hours or so. But what Donald Trump is signaling is he is the de facto Republican nominee and that he's won decisively in Iowa, that he intends to move forward and to win next in New Hampshire. That's the meaning of that speech, incoherent though it may have been.
Steve, if he is the de facto nominee of the Republican Party, where does that put the Republican Party of 2024 with regards to police? Are they still the party of law and order and the military? Seeing as how there were negative comments involving the military, are they still the party that believes in a strong national defense? Because right now, Congress can't seem to pass aid to either Israel or Ukraine.
I think it's very difficult to make an argument that the Republican Party is an internationalist party, is the party of security, when you have a fetish inside the party, starting with Donald Trump, for Vladimir Putin. You have scores and scores of MAGA commentators who are routinely featured on Russian state TV as advocating a dissident American position framed through Russian propaganda as the virtuous one. These people are the heirs to the America First isolationist movement of the 1930s. All over the world's autocrats and dictators are cheering the rise of Donald Trump. And so when you look at the Republican Party, at the end of the day, it supports not as a declaration of membership, and that's not what I mean, but as an institution. That institution, lock, stock, and barrel, is controlled by a faction that does not believe in elections, has promised retribution, and has promised imprisonment for political enemies. You saw a very brief taste of Donald Trump's demagoguery right there when he talked about the fact that there are more people invading the country, terrorists from insane asylums coming over, that exceeds the 20 million person population of the state of New York. None of this is true, but it is routinely said. It is usually unchallenged, and it has overwhelmed the capacity by any reasonable measurement of the White House for some time to be able to respond to it. And it is deeper, more entrenched, and more supported than at any moment than it has ever been in this country since Donald Trump came down that escalator sometime in 2015.
Steve, Larry Diamond, who's one of the world's foremost experts on the rise and falls of democracies, he's talked about the problematic way we primary candidates in this country, and that it is bringing out the most extreme candidates because really only the diehards generally show up to vote in these primaries and caucuses. Do you think we need to change the way that we are going about this first contest in the election cycle?
Well, I don't think that at the end of the day that the problem in American democracy is a systems or a structure problem, which is not to say we don't have enormous systems and structures problems, including a completely broken reapportionment and redistricting system that as an outcome basically gives members of Congress the power to pick their voters as opposed to the other way around. At the end of the day, 40% of the country doesn't have $400 available. You have tens of millions of people that are unbanked. You have 1 million people that were killed in an opioid crisis, and you have a cohort of the population that falls squarely in what Franklin Roosevelt would have called the forgotten man in a different generation. But people who are unseen and unheard in this country have a vote, and they manifest itself. And so what we are seeing in this moment is something we have never seen in the modern history of the country, at least not since the late 1930s, which is the embrace of an autocratic movement in the form of an isolationist political movement that is jingoistic, nationalistic, and hostile to racial equality and basic human rights. And specifically with regard to Trump, the peaceful transition of power in the U.S. Constitution.
It may be up to the Democrats to figure out a way to get them to demand answers to the problems you just pointed out.
We had Vivek Ramaswamy suspend his campaign. We've heard from Nikki Haley. We've heard from Ron DeSantis. Just your thoughts, your takeaways here.
Well, unsurprisingly, we have one of the three candidates took Donald Trump up on his magnanimity, threw his support fully behind him, ended the race, and that's Vivek Ramaswamy, who also ended the race as a conspiracy theorist, denying that it was al-Qaeda who attacked America on September 11th, instead insisting that it was the American government. We heard from Ron DeSantis a speech that, from my perspective, as somebody who's been around the track through a nomination process and a presidential campaign in a general election, is DeSantis's comments were almost delusional. His campaign is regarded inside of Washington, inside the kind of campaign community, as one of the great debacles in modern campaign history. A year ago tonight, he was the overwhelming Republican frontrunner, and he nosedived from beginning to end. Nikki Haley is substantially correct now that it really functionally will be a two-person race. It will be she versus Donald Trump in the weeks ahead. But Nikki Haley has a problem, and the problem is that she's almost predestined to lose, looking at the polling numbers in her home state of South Carolina against Trump, which is the knockout punch in the race, as the professor intimated earlier. Both Haley and DeSantis are doomed by their positions in their home states. You can't be the nominee of the party and lose your home state, and that's where both of those candidates are headed. So tonight, Donald Trump would have had a convincing victory if you added up the totals of all of the other candidates together. It is the most decisive victory for any candidate in the history of the Iowa caucuses on the Republican side, for sure, and it shouldn't be discounted. Republican voters are making a choice, and I've heard a lot of people talk about the drop in turnout. Remember, as that turnout gets smaller, the base is hotter and more extreme, and we'll see that dynamic play out.